Welcome back to the Donkey Vote political podcast for another interview. And today we are honored to be joined by the member for Bass, Bridget Archer. Bridget, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be with you.
Just for our audience out there who may not know an entirely lot about you, could you give us a little brief description of yourself just before we get into the questions?
So I'm the member for Bass, which is in northern Tasmania, the major centre, I guess, in my electorate is the city of Launceston. I was first elected in 2019 and then re-elected in 2022. I'm 48 years of age and I have 5 children and run a beef and sheep farm with my husband.
There are a lot of people who come from farming backgrounds into politics over, considerably, especially the National Party in Parliament, and a considerable amount of Liberals as well have come from a farming background. So that's pretty interesting as well that you come from a farming background into politics.
Yeah, well, I sort of married into the farm, I guess, and my background before that personally was in local government, and before that, I actually spent a lot of time in my professional life working in hospitality.
And I guess that's stuff we're going to be talking about in our upcoming questions. So we might as well get straight into them. My first question to you, Richard, is how was your high school and university life? And do you have any memorable moments?
Yeah, look, it was pretty disjointed in some ways. So my high school life was pretty or standard, I guess. But I was a good student probably up until around year 12 when I had a very disruptive home situation and actually did really badly in year 12. So everything I think I'd sort of thought that I might do up until that point was a bit disrupted. Luckily for me, I guess, I did year 11 and 12 under the former sort of high school certificate where you did 5 level 3 subjects or up to 5 level 3 subjects in year 11 and up to 5 in year 12. So my results were good enough from year 11, fortunately, to qualify for entry into university. So I did, when I finished year 12, went to university straight out of school, like you guys are all about to do. And I was studying a science and law degree, which was not my first choice when I applied to university. But as I said, my results were such that I wouldn't have qualified for my first choice. And it just wasn't really for me. So I didn't last too long before I dropped out and went and started working. And then I went back to university when I was a bit older. I think I was about 25, and started again and graduated, when I was about 27, the Bachelor of Arts, and then went back and did some postgrad in international relations. Yeah, so I was a bit of a mature age student by then.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing as well because not everyone entirely really is ready to complete those post high school sort of education after year 12, straight after, like when you're 18, 19. Maybe because a lot of students, like within our grade, I think Tobias can speak of this as well, and so can George. There's some people who still don't really know what they want to do. So it's not always the end of the world if you don't know what you want to do, and you can pursue postgraduate study. You can pursue post high school studies later on, and you could work for a couple of years as you did, Bridget, and then come back to university 3-4 years later and actually have a better idea of what you want to study and what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, and I think increasingly people understand that, concept of lifelong learning, and that, even when I went through school, I think there was an expectation that you decide what it is that you want to do and you take that pathway. But I think in the 30 years since then, since I left school, I think we have a growing understanding that people will change careers several times throughout their lives, either by choice, because they decide they want to do something else, or by necessity. I think we live in an age of sort of, technological change and that sort of thing. And I think, all of you guys saying you going into sort of IT fields, for example, those are rapidly changing and evolving sort of fields. And so I think now people have a much greater understanding that they'll probably change careers many times. And I think if you're very open to that idea, and not worry about it and embrace opportunities that come up, because I think that's the other side. And certainly what's happened for me is that I never would have imagined that I would have got involved in politics, for example. And, but I think being open-minded about opportunities when they come up and being prepared to take a bit of a chance is good as well.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you there. And just going back also to your response, what was the actual course that you wanted to study that you weren't necessarily able to get into?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to do medicine.
Oh, wow.
And as I said, I'd been a pretty decent student until year 12, where my personal circumstances, my life circumstances at home were really difficult, and I just didn't do well enough in year 12 to qualify.
Yeah, and medicine is always a very, very hard sort of field to get
That's
into.
pretty brutal.
It is very brutal. It is. And, if circumstances were different, you might be a doctor, Bridget, and you may have never entered politics.
Yeah, although there seems to be a lot of doctors in the parliament these days, so you never know.
That is true. Some of them have doctorates and other things, not in medicine, but there are a lot of doctors there.
Yeah, there does seem to be a growing number of medical doctors getting involved in politics. And I guess that's, like anything, people see some challenges in their particular area of expertise and want to get involved in trying to resolve them, I guess.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, in that sense, all better for the country. So,
yeah.
I think we'll now move on to our second question. Tobias.
Yes, Bridget, before you entered Parliament, you worked at a Tasmanian herb. Herbalist? I don't know if I said that word.
Yeah.
As a assistant career, are you able to talk to us about your connection to herbal and how your Tasmanian professional sprout?
Yeah, so I got this job with the Tasmanian Herbarium, which is the plant collection arm of the Tasmanian Museum. So it basically holds the collection of all the plant species in Tasmania, dried collections, and they're all data-based with the localities where they were found, the first place that they were described, and that sort of thing. So that information is used for lots of different things. For example, when I was there, that data was used to inform the regional forest agreements which were being negotiated at that time, for example. So, or also looking at where threatened and endangered species of plants might exist, that type of mapping of plants. Interestingly, we also were involved in a sort of a commercial project while I was there, a research project which was collecting plant specimens from across the state and breaking them into their parts, flowers, leaves, bark, drying those and sending them to a pharmaceutical company who were studying them to see whether they had any sort of active compounds that could be used for medicine. So it was a pretty interesting job.
I guess in a sense, a lot of the stuff that you did in that herbology sort of role allowed you to do, I guess, in a sense, allowed you to help you in your farming career, I guess. Maybe not necessarily because you did say you were a beef cattle farmer, but of course, you're growing some vegetables on the farm. So that sort of knowledge, I guess, helps you even in the farming sense.
Yeah, I think it's actually been really helpful in developing an interest in some areas as well. Like, so from that job, I've developed a bit of an interest in the environment, for example. I've developed an interest in, weed management and looking at sort of invasive species and things like that. But I think it's certainly given me an interest in the environment and in sort of conservation area as well.
Yeah, and that's all important right now. And even for me right now, being in the Philippines, you see so much rubbish at the beaches, and climate change is a real thing over here. And I know a couple of years back here there was a volcanic eruption. A lot of people and a lot of villagers living around the Ta'ala volcano, which is actually only 30-40 minutes from where I am currently. A lot of the villagers there lost their homes and had to relocate. And it is a real important thing that's happening in the world. The amount of conservation and action that's needed is a lot now, because there's been a lot of, over the last 10 to 15 years, especially in Australia, there's been a lot of inaction.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's also probably taught me to a degree that, these things are evolving, I guess, all the time, and that we're learning, our knowledge is evolving, if you like we're learning things all the time. And that data and information that we collect, whether it's in that case with plant species or whatever, the more information that you can collect, the more data sets and data points that you have, the more informed you are, the better decisions you can make. So, I think it's given me a lot of good skills and knowledge, I think, to take into a wider context.
Yeah, and all those, and I know you're probably one of the only parliamentarians with that sort of herbology background. So that expertise, in a sense, is really, really important within Parliament, sharing your knowledge and ideas in that sort of field with the rest of the parliamentarians and your liberal colleagues, especially.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as impressive as the doctors and the scientists in the Parliament, but yeah, I have found it useful, certainly in informing, my knowledge and experience. And I think that goes to the question you asked earlier too about, we learn, we learn things throughout our lives, and some of that is formal through formal education like school or university. But something I really notice is how much that real world exposure or experience has helped in terms of that formal education that you get. Sometimes a lot of it doesn't make as much sense until you get out and you start applying that knowledge in a real world sense. And even now, there are scenarios that I come across or situations where it might be something that I learned at university and I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense now because I've seen it, applied in my professional life. So, I think, again, it goes to that idea of just learning is really, I think, a lifelong thing, and something that if we're open to that, you can really grow and develop your skills by building on that formal education.
Yeah, and especially a lot of people learn in different ways, as you said, and especially about sort of, I guess, more formal more informal way of learning, like through actually doing sort of stuff, I guess, is a way that people learn. And not everyone's book smart, not everyone learns via tests and that sort of thing. So actually doing that sort of action and actually learning on the job is a really good thing, and something that should be pushed for a lot of people across Australia.
Yeah, because sometimes I think it works the other way. Like I'm one of those people who, I have a good sort of recall, a good memory, so I can retain information or learn things like quite easily. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have developed an understanding of the concept until you can apply it in practice sometimes. And then I think, oh, yeah, I understand that more rather than just remembering it.
Yeah, and I guess in a sense, having a good memory is important in Parliament, because you got to remember a lot of policies, you got to remember a lot of, and then you got to remember to you got to do a lot of debating, and you got to remember sometimes as you're in opposition stuff that the government said previously and that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially if they lie.
Which could happen more often than not.
You'd think it does a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. The sad reality of the situation. Yeah. We'll now move on to our next question. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you used to also work in the hospitality industry before going back to university, and this includes working at the 2000 Olympics. How was this experience overall?
Yeah, it was great. So I was working in a restaurant during the time in Sydney during the time of the Sydney Olympics, and it was great. Like, particularly as a young person, there was a great atmosphere in the city at that time. There was a lot of people from all over the world, and I really thought it was great. It was great for the city and great for the country as well. So I spent a lot of time working in hospitality before university and after university. It's probably one of my favourite sort of jobs that I've had. And, I think that there's actually some, strong correlation between the hospitality industry and, politics and representation in some ways. And those are certainly skills that I learned in the hospitality industry that, again, I've taken into political life, certainly, becoming more comfortable talking with all kinds of people and in a lot of different situations, sometimes dealing with people who are difficult, sometimes having to resolve, challenges and things like that. So I think it's been a good experience as well, but also just a job that I really enjoy. It's very sociable and very engaging sort of work. So yeah, I really enjoyed that time. And as I say, as a young person, I think it's because I think it's quite demanding hours. I was working 13 shifts a week at that time.
That's crazy.
Two shifts. 2 shifts a day, except for Monday. I think I had Monday nights off, and it was great at the time. But I don't think I could sustain it now. Yeah, and I have a pretty demanding job now.
Yeah, and how old were you when you were actually working in Sydney during the Olympics? You were in your early 20s or so?
I would have been about 25. I would have been about 25 then. Yeah.
Ah, okay. And yeah, and as you said, a lot of good I guess in the hospitality industry you are dealing with a lot of people that you don't choose to deal with. There could be some Karen-y sort of customers, there could be some nice customers there. So I guess in a sense, as you did say, it is pretty similar to Parliament because sadly there are some personalities and some politicians out there that are harder to deal with than others. So in a sense, I don't want to name names, but
I think we all know who you mean.
Yeah.
I think that's right. But I think the other good thing about it, particularly at that time, was that, something like the Olympics brings people from all over the world. So I think that opportunity for engaging, with people from all over the world, from different cultures, was also really great. It's one of the great things about Australia anyway, but I think it was really amplified with something like the Olympics, and people are coming together in a really positive spirit in an event like that. So there was a really good, atmosphere in the community and whatever. And of course, we've just celebrated the crowning of Tasmania's Princess Mary, who met Prince Frederick in a hotel in Sydney during the Sydney Olympics. So yeah, so there's a nice little twist to the story.
Ah, so you and did you know Prince Mary before she got
no,
Tasmania's a small place, but
Yeah, Tasmania is a small place, but we're all very excited in Tasmania. We're all claiming Queen Mary as our own now.
Yeah, so that is as you did say, the Prince Frederick, and a lot of his cousins and other royalty friends were in Sydney in that time. So, as you did say, a lot of cultures came to Australia during the Olympics, and they are still coming in now. So, that's one of the great things, I guess, with Australia, seeing as it is such a great country to come to. Many people love coming there, and we get to experience different cultures from all across the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's terrific.
Yeah. We'll now move on to our fourth question for you, Bridget. George.
Okay, so before you entered federal parliament, you were a councillor in Georgetown, serving as a deputy mayor and as a mayor before 2019. How was the transition overall from being a mayor of your local community to representing your local community in the federal parliament?
Look, in some ways it was pretty straightforward because I think local government is a good introduction to sort of elected life or public life. And I think it's a good way of maintaining that grassroots representation, because in local government, it's very, they often say local government is the area of government closest to the people. And I think that that's true in many ways. You're elected to represent people directly in the community where you live. So you spend a lot of time talking to people, at the post office or down at the newspaper shop or whatever it is. So it's a very high level of interpersonal relationships. And so I think that's been good. That's something I have tried to take through when I was elected to the federal parliament. I still spend a lot of time talking to people at the newspaper shop or, buying a stamp or whatever. And I think that's a really good thing. And that's one of the things that I really like about being an elected representative. But of course, it's also like a bit of a shock because it's a much bigger role. The council, for example, that I was mayor of, it's very small. Like, I mean, there's 29 councils in Tasmania. There's only like 500,000 people. So they're quite small community councils. And then, of course, I've gone to representing a much bigger area geographically and a lot more people. And obviously, just a different situation. So the councils, for example, here in Tasmania, and I know this is not true everywhere else in the country, but in Tasmania, they're still largely not party political. And the decision-making is very collaborative. Now, I've found that a good thing. And that has probably informed the way that I behave as a federal representative, sometimes probably to the disappointment of my party, because I think outcomes are really important, and I seek to, I got involved in public life in the first place because I wanted to make my community a better place and to get good outcomes. So I still try to take that focus into my work here, and I try to avoid just making decisions on party political lines and try to look at what's in the best interest of the community. And in part, that's because of that local government background, because that's how decision making operates in councils. You've got in my case, 9 people coming together, having a debate, coming to a decision, then everybody gets behind that decision, even if they didn't agree at the time. But they trust the consensus, the democracy of the process, if you like. So I think I've tried to carry that through, but it was a bit of a shock to go from a small council to, a much bigger area of representation and bigger parliament and different decision-making process.
Yeah, and as you did say before, the way I guess you act in federal parliament, some of your Liberal colleagues may not appreciate, but I guess in a sense, sometimes that's, I guess, one of the good things of the Liberal Party. You don't have to. There is no, we telling you how to vote. There's a free vote for all sort of legislation. So you vote the way that you believe. You vote the way that you believe, and as we've seen with like Julie and Lisa with the Voice Department and yourself with the Voice Department and many other legislations that you've gone against the government. The Liberal Party, in a sense, can't really stop you doing that. I guess that's one of the good things with the Liberal Party in general, that there is that sort of free vote and freedom of speech, as opposed to the Labour Party, where you have to follow party lines and have to vote with party on all sorts of issues.
Yeah, I think there's probably, pros and cons with both sides. I mean, I think that the Labor Party has a different decision-making process. Their caucus process is different, for example, to our sort of party room processes. But it's very important to me, and it was one of the reasons why I joined the Liberal Party, is that I do value, freedom of thought and, genuine representation, and I said when I was first elected, that I wanted to be sort of an authentic representative for my community. And I think it's impossible to do that if you don't put the interests of the community first. And I mean, I think if you put the interests of your community first and they are happy with the representation you provide, they'll re-elect you, and that's good, ultimately good for the party as well. But it's got to be what's in the community's interest first, in my opinion.
Yep, and sometimes that is straight away with a lot of federal politicians. A lot of them are a bit self-obsessed, I would say, and are very concerned about their own political gain, and sometimes shy away from their own communities. And I mean, that is the job of most parliamentarians. That's the job of parliamentarians in general. You are representing the community. You're not there for your own personal political gain. And I think there are some politicians who are there for their own political gain, and in a sense, aren't really representing their communities correctly.
Yeah, I think it can also be the case too that I think it can be a difficult dynamic because we are, almost all parliamentarians are party affiliated in some way. So of course you want to form government, you want to have a team as well. So that's also important. But I think we're also operating increasingly in a media environment that sort of feeds that division and conflict as well, and will create or perpetuate conflict. So I think that can make it difficult as well for parliamentarians to just focus on their communities. So, I think I wouldn't be too harsh, I guess, on them. I think most people are really well-intentioned and want to try and represent their communities, but I think there's a lot of competing pressures sometimes as well.
Welcome back after a short little break there and me climbing up a hill. We're back to for our last two questions with Bridget. So I believe the next question is with you, Tobias.
Yes. Who would you say is your political role model and idol?
Political role model. Gosh, I don't know. Probably nobody much in recent history, I think. I'd probably have to go back a little bit further. But, I don't know. Like, I think, I don't know that I really have a political role model or idol, but,
is it like
probably...
a politician? Is it like a politician that you have appreciation for, or think they did a good job back in the day, or whatever?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of different parts of different people, I guess, that I've admired over time. Like certainly one politician that I admire and that I, would see as a bit of a, role model is a former member for Bass here, Warwick Smith, who was probably the last Liberal MP to retain this seat for a couple of terms. And he was a very good local member and certainly somebody that I would seek to sort of model myself on. But I think there's many people that have made important contributions, certainly to Australian political life. And people who I think that I most admire are those type of conviction politicians who I think have become increasingly rare. And I think it's something that I'd like to see us get back to, is politicians that are prepared to stand up for things, stand up for what they believe in, and go into fight for their constituents.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Bridget. One of the people in here was asking for the bags, but yeah. So I guess in that sense, I think something we can take away from that is that, from what we've interviewed a lot of politicians, not many of them have a specific politician that they model themselves on. All of them have told us that, not every politician is perfect, so there's not really any point just modeling yourself on one person, and it's important to, model yourself on multiple people and make sure that, in a sense, you take the best qualities out of most politicians in general, and don't, I guess, abide yourself and force yourself just to be, a supporter of, let's say, like John Howard. John Howard was good in some senses, but there were some policies that he might have been wrong with. So it's important just to take the good things from most politicians and try and base yourself and try and be the best politician that you can be, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think it's about leadership too. So I think that probably more likely to model my behaviour or my aspiration on values rather than on people in particular. And, I think looking for those sort of, leadership qualities that we see, not just in politicians, but I think we can see that across our communities. And I can think of people in my community, for example, who are great leaders and really values-based leaders, but they're not necessarily politicians. They might work in a health space, or they might work in, not-for-profits and community sectors, or they might be in churches or wherever they are. But I think it's that values-based leadership qualities that I would probably model myself on rather than a person.
Interesting, very interesting there. We'll now move on to our final question, just because I know you're going to go to a town hall meeting in 10 minutes, so we might as well get this finished off as quickly as possible. So finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those who are entering university or high school?
Yeah, just be yourself, I think, would be the most important advice that I could have. Be who you are, be open to the possibilities that lie before you. Everything is open to change. Everything that you think or know or feel or care about now, will change, and that's okay. So, just be yourself, trust yourself, and you can't really go wrong.
That's probably the best advice we've seen on the whole podcast. So, thanks, Bridget. Yeah. So those are all our questions for you. We do really appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking to us. I know we were pretty limited on time, and we've wanted to do this for a couple of months now. So it's great that you were able to come on and talk to us about these important issues and talk to our viewers out there.
Well, it's great to meet you all, and best of luck to all of you and to all of your viewers on the next part of your journey. Look forward to seeing what you do next.